Welcome to UFHL Now! A close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes. High reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to another edition of UFHL Now, the 33rd edition. Patrick Waugh, pretty good goaltender to wear 33. My name is Dean Millard. I am the owner of Duckman's Domination and the Mighty Mallards. I am also very honored to be the head of baseball for Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports and the commissioner of UFLB. So I'm all in with UFFS. I love it. I live it, and I can't wait to tell you all about it as we are broadcast on Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. UFSN is your one-stop fantasy sports shop. If you would like to get your fantasy show on our network, and we have big plans for this, athlete-owned sports, AO Sports, is going to be a big part of our future and the network that they have going. If you'd like to be a part of it, you can email UFSN at UFFsports.com, or you can give a follow on Twitter at UFS Network. You can also follow Duckman's Domination on Twitter at Ducks Domination. So please give us a follow and check out what we have going on with our active roster and, of course, our prospects, which is a big part of what we are doing. And a big part of what UFHL is our partners, our title sponsor, Instat, title sponsor of Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League, EliteProspects.com, Fantalytica.tech, Puckpedia, and Maplewood Hockey. Thank you so much to everybody that is involved in this platform, and certainly we couldn't do it without our valuable partners. Speaking of EliteProspects.com, we're going to get to the Players of the Week, sponsored by Elite Prospects, in just a little bit. We'll have our six-pack of top performers, top 10 standings so far in the early going, and you know them, you love them. Number 1 in your heart, number 35 in the program, Larry Fisher is our UFHL Insider, and he will join us very shortly. So all of that still to come right after we get into it now.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network, UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, UFSN at UFFsports.com.
All right, we'll kick things off with the EliteProspects.com Players of the Week that were handed out on the first Monday, and will be handed out on each Monday. A couple of Kings and an Oiler. The Pacific Division, you have some pretty impressive players in this fantasy, or in the UFHL, that, you know, I think maybe some people are a little bit surprised at how certainly a team can get going. And obviously Mike Smith, I have not been a big Mike Smith guy. I thought that the weakness of the Oilers goaltending, or the Oilers franchise, was going to be Mike Smith, but he proved me wrong for sure. So there is a look at the Players of the Week, sponsored by EliteProspects.com, and that will be handed out on the first, or every Monday rather, and we've already handed out the first Monday. So that was the top performers from Monday. What we like to do on this show is take a look at the six-pack of top performers from the last week of airing of this show. So we aired this show last Friday, so we go back to it, and surprise, surprise, the best player in the game. He is the top point getter when it comes to fantasy in UFHL. Conor McDavid, thanks to 6 goals and 3 assists, 12 shots on goal. He came into this season saying, I'm going to shoot a lot more, especially with a one-timer. 5 of his 9 points on the power play. That's not surprising. So the Yetis and the Oilers, very happy with how McDavid came out of the cannon. Igor Schesturkan of Red Army, a late call-up last year for Red Army, might actually cost them first place in the regular season. They did win the playoffs, but Schesturkan might have helped them, and he just doing what he did last year when he got called up. 3 wins, just 3 goals against, and he's got 99 problems, and 99 saves aren't one of them. Brilliant week for Igor Schesturkan of the Rangers and Red Army. And Marcus Foligno, the Minnesota Wild, and the Titans getting it done. 2 goals and a helper, 24 penalty minutes. Larry and I are going to talk about penalty minutes in a bit, but he got a lot of them in this week, and he, 3 shots on goal. So 3 points, 3 shots on goal, majority of those points coming from the Pims, which I find very interesting. I love the fight stat that we have, that's for sure. Okay, rounding out the top 6, you got another Oiler, Leon Draisaitl, 2 goals, 5 helpers, +5. Unfortunately, we still have that, and 8 shots on goal. Jordan Kyrou of the St. Louis Blues helped the West Coast Express get it done. 5 assists, a couple of goals, and a block shot. Draisaitl, by the way, helping the Grizzlies. You'll see them in our top 10 very shortly. And Kevin Shattenkirk, 32-year-old defenseman for the Anaheim Ducks. The Stallions loving the production they received from Shattenkirk. A couple of goals, 3 assists, 9 shots on goal. Also chipped in with some block shots. I think he had 5 of them and a hit. So congratulations to the Stallions and, of course, the Anaheim Ducks, who love it when Shattenkirk gets it done. So I mentioned the Grizzlies. When it came to the top 10, you would see them. I'm really loving this new feature we've got for the top 10. So let's dive into our weekly top 10 now. So there we go. There's a look at the brand new top 10, the first of the UFHL season. And I mentioned Draisaitl helping the Grizzlies out. They are number 1, are the Grizz right now in the early part of the season. We, of course, are very, very early in the season. And there's an interesting kind of separation when you look at the top 10 of the standings. You certainly have the Grizzlies, then the Yetis, then the Red Army. They are all within like 4 points. The gap between Grizzlies and Red Army is 4.27 points. There's a bit more of a secondary tier there with the Battlehawks, West Coast Express, Can West Generals, the Stallions, the Royals, and the Titans. They are anywhere from 200 to 218 points. So there is a separation at the top 3, and a little bit more of a separation with the Battlehawks, West Coast Express, and Can West. And then the only team that doesn't have 200 points in the top 10 is the Bentley Jacks, and so impressive that they're there as an expansion team. So it's tight. The difference between first and 10th is 35 points. That could be a fantastic night that you could have. Maybe a few fights, game winners, who knows. So it's tight right now. And some of the other teams outside of the top 10, congratulations to Kamikaze, Gators, Strong Island. They'll be looking to improve. And then the teams, you know who they are, bringing up the bottom end of the standings. That would be guys like us, North Stars, Blizzard, etc. So interesting how things are starting to shape up early on a little bit in UFHL. A lot of moves being made in UFHL, and we'll see if that continues. Let's get into the good stuff, though, right now with Larry Fisher, our UFHL Insider, on UFHL Now.
time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL. Now!
All right, as I bring in the insider, Larry Fisher, for Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League. This is show 33, which we've talked about goalie numbers. That was my older brother Darren's number, and I had to use all his old equipment, so that's why I probably went with 35, so I wasn't the same. But some terrific goalies wore number 33, and it might have been the most popular goalie number out there, I think, when I was growing up anyway.
Yeah, and then Patrick Waugh obviously was the big 33 that everybody in my generation certainly idolized and looked up to. So he was the 33 that got a lot of them. But you're right, anywhere between 30, 31, 33, 35, those odd numbers in there. And then, of course, number one was always a popular goalie number. And then, Dominic Hasek and some of the other guys that went 39 or something else. There's a lot of numbers, but I felt 31, 33, 35 seemed to be the most popular.
The first rep team I played on, my goalie partner wore 00. Shout out to Kevin Poirier for being an original when we were 13. But speaking of goalies, last week on the Duck Call, I discussed how I thought goaltenders needed to have maybe more significance when it comes to statistics. And I'll just be honest, Larry, sometimes you don't see the forest through the trees when you have an idea. And I thought I was making a lot of good points. The thing I didn't factor in was the games played angle, and that's where the why goalies are lower. So while I still think we can improve the statistics as a quality stat, as an example, I do realize now that goalies aren't playing 78 games or 71 games like Grant Fuhr did that one. I think it was 79 games he played that one year. So I was corrected. Thank you. You kind of let me know the error of my ways, but I still think we can have a discussion to improve the goaltending position and the stats that we have.
And as we talked about, Dean, I think potentially two different goalie scoring systems, one for the regular season and one for playoffs. Because in playoffs, it's head-to-head, and goalies, generally your starting goalie in the NHL starts every game come playoffs. They don't platoon. They don't get an off night. They play if there's a best of 7, they're playing all 7 games. You go with your number one guy. So in the playoffs, that scoring system, when I really paid close attention to it in the UFHL playoffs, the goalies were right there with the top performers every night because their stats are equal and everybody's playing 7 games in a best of 7 series. But as you mentioned, games played in the regular season, your top goalies, especially nowadays in the NHL, they're turning into more and more of a work share. Not 50-50, but 60-40, and very rarely is it 70-30. Like it's out of a block of 10, it's mostly your starting goalies playing 6 or 7 and your backups 3 or 4. So you don't get that 82 game point production from a goaltender that you get from a skater. If they stay healthy all year, you're getting the same equivalent, like, a win is still equivalent to a goal, all the rest, but goalies are only playing, 60 to 70% of what a skater is getting. So they're going to come out at the end of the year, like you said, only one in the top 40. Well, that's pretty good for Andrei Vasilevsky to make the top 40 when he only played 60 or 70% of the games that Conor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and all the skaters played. So I think maybe you add some value to the goalie categories just for the regular season being a total points league so that they get that extra 30-40% bump in the regular season. So your top goalie is still getting the 100% as if they played 82 games.
Glenn Hall is looking at the platoon system and saying, hold my beer, over 500 straight games. I know there's no injuries in the Legends League, but that durability has to count for something for Glenn Hall. So thank you for pointing that out. And I do think this is worth a discussion. Certainly it'll be something that I'll be bringing up either at the midseason or the off-season meetings. To have a discussion about goaltending, and there will be some data that we can provide, because I think you should do that if you're suggesting some sort of change or value. And maybe this doesn't go over very well. Maybe the goalie union is small in the UFHL. We'll have to see. But I do think there could be some tweaking and some added value, and maybe, like you said, on a different level when it comes to the playoffs and the regular season. We always talk about things not slowing down, and business is picking up in the trade department after a little bit of a lull before the season a few weeks ago. It's been steady in the transaction department lately, hasn't it?
It has, Dean. 9 total trades over the past week. A handful of them were noteworthy deals. And I think what we're seeing, Dean, is franchises just really jostling for position in the standings and trying to find their way. And so an interdivision trade here, the Stallions and the Grizzlies. Grizzlies are in first place right now heading into the weekend. Stallions are top 10 franchise in 7th place, but they're 5th in the Gretzky division. Stallions are building around guys like Quentin Byfield and Anton Lundell, who's off to a good start. Stallions have a younger franchise, so it appealed to them to get Kaylor Yamamoto. Whereas the Grizzlies, they're in win now mode. They're built in the current, and they don't have a big penalty guy. And as we saw last night, Dean, Zach Kassian here going to the Grizzlies. No better evidence than last night. Zach Kassian gets 14 penalty minutes, and his value in the UFHL, his points for the night, actually outproduced Conor McDavid, who had 2 goals and an assist. So penalty minutes are still a premium. You want somebody on your roster that can rack up some PIMs. So the Grizzlies bring in the toughness with Zach Kassian in exchange for the future potential of Kaylor Yamamoto, and breaks up what they thought was going to be a line this year. A lot of people thought it was going to be Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto line, and obviously a Draisaitl in the middle there, and the Grizzlies had all 3 of those guys, but of course the Oilers went and put Draisaitl on the top line, and Yamamoto's kind of been playing down the depth chart. So a bit of a shakeup here, but essentially a swap of Oiler forwards, Zach Kassian to the Grizzlies for Kaylor Yamamoto to the upstart Stallions.
Yeah, this is, I was hoping you would bring up that line because they broke up what could have been a great line, but I don't know if the Oilers are going back to that line or not. The other thing is, and we talked about this in the offseason, what's more valuable, a 10-minute misconduct or a goal? And that's why we tried to make some changes. I'll use Nate Thompson as an example. He got into 2 fights the other night. We brought in fighting. That's earning your penalty minutes, in my opinion, as opposed to a 10-minute misconduct. No disrespect on the way Zach Kassian plays the game. I love that he plays the game, but should a 10-minute misconduct make him more valuable than Conor McDavid in a game where Conor McDavid scored 2 goals?
Yeah, I think it's rare, but it certainly magnifies that when that happens, when you see that on a night. And the Stallions led the entire UFHL in scoring last night, largely thanks to Zach Kassian, who now today we're talking about being traded to the Grizzlies. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right, Dean. Realistically, that shouldn't be valued as much. And we are trending that way. The franchises took notice, and it's a 3-year progression to get penalty minutes down so that you don't just knock it down overnight. And then the franchises that built around the Zach Kassians, they take such a big hit. So it's going to be a 3-year evolution to get that 10-minute misconduct producing less points than a first star 2 goals and an assist night for Conor McDavid. As obviously everybody knows, McDavid had a bigger impact on the game last night than Zach Kassian. He should come away with a higher fantasy score. But definitely, this is a trade, Dean, that I got tipped off on. It hasn't been announced as of when we're talking, but certainly will be news today. So it's nice that the insiders getting kept in the know again, that we're starting to get to break some trades on the show, or trades that haven't been announced as of this exact time.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. We have taken steps as a league to make that, but we have to make it a smooth process so that owners who have played by the rules and picked up penalty minute guys don't get punished. So perfect way to put that. All right, is this the trade so far that has involved maybe the most players in UFHL history? I think that I don't know if I've seen a trade involving more players yet.
Yeah, it's the 10-man swap, right? 5 for 5 here. And I don't know if it needed to be this big, Dean, when you look at the trade. You look at the top 2 names on each, or the top 3 on the going to the Tornadoes and the top 3 going, I don't know if they needed to build in all the depth that they did here, but certainly this is a blockbuster trade. And as far as fantasy value versus cap hit goes, Anthony Beauvillier to the Tornadoes probably brings the best value. But then you start thinking about Legends League, and Jonathan Taves going to the Mystics is big. And Jeremy Swayman, who the Tornadoes had identified as, potentially their future number 1 goaltender, moving to the Mystics, which allows Colin Mills and the Mystics to have the goaltending tandem in Boston with They already acquired Linus Ullmark earlier in the offseason. Now they got Jeremy Swayman. So Ullmark, Swayman tandem for the Mystics. And the depth guys that went to the Mystics are generally more productive guys. Svechnikov seems to have found a role with the Winnipeg Jets, and Matthew Highmore got on the score sheet last night with the Vancouver Canucks as well. And Dylan DeMello certainly a serviceable defenseman, whereas Chris Wagner's in the AHL. John Moore's not dressing. So again, I think the Tornadoes paid a bit of a premium here to get the best player value moving forward with Anthony Beauvillier just entering his prime on a pretty good cap hit with the Islanders. And then also Evgeny Dadonov, Dean, with Max Pacioretty going down, the Vegas Golden Knights really need Evgeny Dadonov to step up and start producing there. So we'll see how he performs for the Tornadoes and how long he stays a member of the Tornadoes.
This is, I like this from a Mystics point of view because, we'll see what Jonathan Toews can do, but you mentioned it, the Legends League, and that's a really smart move to go get the Boston Bruins goaltending because no matter who it seems to be, the Boston Bruins goaltenders seem to produce historically. We'll see if that continues. But I like that move from the Mystics. Okay, so here's the next one, and I might as well just lead in because it involves my team. We sent Dante Fabro and Nick Benino to the Bentley Jacks, and this is what I was talking about last week during this segment when I said there might be something going on with Bentley Jacks. And, we liked Dante Fabro. He was a guy we wanted to build around. Not sure 100% if he's maybe plateaued in Nashville or maybe he'll be a guy who gets more of an opportunity. But we saw a chance to get another pick in the first round rather of the 2022 draft, which is, we've made no bones about it, our focus and what we feel is going to really give us the franchise players we need to go along with the great players we have. And the other thing is we have defensemen that are going to need those spots. We have Broberg coming. We have Joseph that hopefully will be regulars by next year. And we wanted to make room for some of those guys. And so we thank Dante Fabro for his time with Duckmans, but we felt, maybe with that first round pick, we can get a higher quality defenseman in the draft if needed.
Yeah, and I think, Dean, we're seeing from both sides of this deal, I think the Bentley Jacks are aggressive in year one. They are the Vegas Golden Knights of the UFHL more so than the Seattle Kraken. They're trying to build to win now. They're in the top 10 in the standings through the first 10 days of the season. They got to be happy about that. Their owners, Darwin Osmond and Drew McDonald, are definitely more so the Bill Foley type. They want to make a splash, win now. And both Dante Fabro and Nick Benino are going to contribute in like I said, maybe that more of a depth role for the Bentley Jacks, but every point counts and it's kept them in the top 10. And you mentioned Dante Fabro's ceiling, and I think it is more like trying to think of a real good example, but maybe even a guy who came through Nashville in Dan Hamhuis. Yeah. A really good NHL defenseman, but never was a fantasy stud, right? And I think that's what you're looking at with Dante Fabro. Really good NHL player. Quality top 4 guy in Nashville, but doesn't move the needle that much in fantasy, at least as far as generating points and getting power play time and all the rest. And then Benino, more of a second, third line, probably third line contributor. And again, but every player has value in the UFHL. So for the Bentley Jacks, this is upgrading 2 roster spots without giving up any roster player. For Duckmans, as you mentioned, you're likely going to have a possibility with the Bentley Jacks first round pick in 2022 to select a player that went as high or potentially higher than Dante Fabro and an impact player for the future rebuild. And anytime you can start accumulating picks, Dean, it definitely helps you to potentially package picks and move up in the draft as well, which I know is a motivating factor for Duckmans looking ahead to that 2022 entry auction.
Yeah, 6 picks now we have, and that's exactly we'll be trying to do that. And the other thing this is really good, I feel, from the Bentley Jacks is both those guys have good contracts. Like, those are good depth players that they can add if they're depth players, and then if they produce, they're on good contracts. So always feel better when both teams come away feeling satisfied, and I think both of us did in that trade. How about this one, Kamikaze and Rock Republic?
Yeah, interesting swap of 2 young players that haven't obviously been in the NHL yet or made an impact, but both were first-round NHL draft picks. Rock Republic, Dean, they're listening. They're watching the UFHL now, which is great. They took notice that we called them out in the season preview, and as well at week 1, we mentioned that they have a lot of players that are no longer waiver exempt, Cal Foot being one of them. And they looked at that and they decided to move Cal Foote to Kamikaze and Dante Kamikaze, Donnie Talk are definitely looking to continue bringing in more first round picks and building out that core of sort of the guys that are just breaking into the NHL. So, and in return, Rock Republic gets Zach Dean, who obviously is a first round pick out of the QMJHL for the Vegas Golden Knights, a forward prospect. So again, I think both these players, it'll be interesting to see how they develop for their new franchises. But Cal Foote's closer to being an NHL impact player, and certainly you look at Rock Republic, they have some waiver exempt guys they want to work in on the back end. They want to get some of their youth into the lineup, and by moving out Cal Foote, it opens up that flexibility for their roster.
Well, we want to say hi to all the Rock Republic fans at their watch party right now at the Octopus Bar and Grill. I think that's where they're watching it. I hope that's a major sponsor for the Rock Republic. But we appreciate when teams watch and comment and reach out because then we know what we're doing is making an impact. And I think it's really important, some of the insider advice, some of the things that you give out and the information. There is so much going on with this league, you miss things. So for us to be able to help out with some of these owners and provide some tips, I think it's certainly worth it. And they weren't done there. Speaking of prospects, holy smokes.
Yeah, big prospect blockbuster here, Dean, and the trend continues. Martin Cott to the Royals. Martin Cott, another one of those players. He still is waiver exempt this season, but final season of waiver exempt, which again, Rock Republic listening, paying attention, starting to move out some of these guys that they could potentially lose on waivers prior to next season. Martin Cott is playing in Colorado's lineup ahead of Alex Newhook, which is somewhat surprising. Martin Cott, again, a mid-first round pick a few years back. Now is his time. He's got to step up and be an NHL player. Colorado needs that depth scoring from their young, drafted, and developed guys. And the Royals certainly need some guys that can fill out the roster at the NHL level, because they had guys like Jack Stadnicka and Joe Veleno that didn't make the NHL cut out of camp. So Martin Cott is a nice piece that's currently in the NHL. And Hugo Alnefelt, Dean, tough spot for him being behind Andrei Vasilevsky in Tampa Bay, but potential future goaltender in Tampa Bay or potential trade chip for Tampa Bay if somebody else is looking for a number one goaltender. And then certainly on the other side, Rock Republic, I really like all four of the prospects they acquired. 2 defenders and 2 forwards. Logan Mailloux, obviously controversial first-round pick for the Montreal Canadiens this year. Jordan Spence, really high-character kid who's got a lot of offensive upside for the Kings. And then Firstov and Nybeck, they're European forwards that are a little bit more boom or bust, but certainly have that boom potential. So all in all, it's an interesting trade involving 6 prospects that I know the Royals were really high on some of the guys they gave up, and certainly Rock Republic paying attention to UFHL Now and realizing that a guy like Martin Cott, if they can't fit him in their active roster this season, and if he doesn't take off in Colorado, well, Duckmans and other franchises will happily take on a former first-round pick on the waiver wire prior to next season.
Okay, so there's 5 of the 9 trades that we saw this week. How about some of the future trades? I mean, like, you did tell everybody about Yevgeny Malkin on our very first show, so we might as well talk about maybe some other Russians who could be on the move.
Yeah, Russian forwards are highlighting the trade block this week, Dean, and the big name, obviously, Nikita Kucherov, and has George Batchel and the Monarchs' patience worn thin with the LTIR, Nikita Kucherov scandals, or whatever you want to call it. He's back on LTIR. Tampa saving some cap space over the next month. Is Kucherov going to be back in a few weeks, which sounds like potentially the case, or are they going to keep him out longer? It'll be interesting to follow that situation, but it's funny that George Batchel reached out and said that the offers only started coming in on Kucherov once he went on LTIR, and I think that's probably because everybody saw the Monarchs off to a decent start. Kucherov being the leading scorer from last year's or this past Stanley Cup playoffs. Everybody thought he's the franchise player there. He's untouchable. Once he got hurt, I think some of the rebuilding franchises really took a look at Nikita Kucherov and, hey, we might be able to offer you somebody who doesn't have as high of a ceiling but is currently producing, and would that interest you? And then we mentioned the Tornadoes, Dean, making that blockbuster trade. Part of a piece coming in was of Jenny Dadonov, and no sooner did he arrive than did they announce that keep your bags packed, we're going to look to flip you. And certainly, Dean, you see on the list here, the Outlaws are looking for a top 6 forward. Kamikaze's putting together a package for a decent NHL forward is what they're looking for. And then certainly the eliminators, Dean, also eyeing a top 6 forward, willing to package a 2023 first-round pick and SCO. So there's a lot of franchises in the market for a forward like Evgeny Dadonov. Certainly if he starts putting some points on the board in place of Max Pacioretty while he's out injured and Mark Stone's out injured, Vegas needs Dadonov to step up. And if he does, he's going to pump his value for the Tornadoes. And then we've talked a lot about Rock Republic, Dean, and again, now they've put on the trade block some of these other players that are in the final year of being waiver exempt. Guys like Ryan McLeod in Edmonton, Jared Anderson-Dolan in Los Angeles, and Isaac Ratcliffe, who's yet to make his NHL debut in Philadelphia. But McLeod and Anderson-Dolan especially, they're right there on the cusp of making the NHL. And if Rock Republic doesn't have room for them and at risk of losing them on waivers prior to next season, maybe you move them now for a guy like Zach Dean, who's got a few years left of being waiver exempt, and sort of recycle the prospect, the feeder system for Rock Republic.
Interesting. Also, didn't get a chance to make it onto this graphic, but the eliminators looking for a top 6 forward and a 2023 first-round pick, and SCO going the other way. The Bentley Jacks thinking about Thomas Greiss because he's off to a hot start. And Andrew Ladd back to the Monarchs. We actually discussed with George a little bit about this. And Troy Stetcher from the Stingrays is still out there. Ladd is on the Monarchs UFAHL team. So interesting that a lot of guys right now are trying to, as you say, every point matters, or other guys are trying to get ahead of waiver situations, which we had a very interesting waiver situation this week with one player and a couple of teams in particular.
Yeah, unfortunately, a bit of a tough break for Duckman's domination on this one. The curious case of Dryden Hunt and the way waivers work in the NHL versus the UFHL. And again, we're always trying to mirror the real world, but there are some exceptions and some places where you don't necessarily mirror the real world. And obviously in the NHL, a player that goes on waivers, they stay on waivers for the full 24 hours, and then they're eligible to be demoted. What that means, Dean, is they get one extra day of NHL salary because the NHL pays daily, not over the entire year as a cap hit. They pay a daily salary. So certainly a guy like Nick Batan, he stays on Vancouver's roster for that extra day and collects NHL salary. But Brock Besser returns from injury, and he's in the lineup that night. So the NHL has flexibility there to allow same-day demotions. And we really looked at it and said, this makes sense for the UFHL too, because we're not paying anybody any daily salary. There's no reason that as soon as you announce waivers, you can't move them down. And so in this case, what happened was the Generals waived Dryden Hunt, looking ahead, Dean, to the not the day of, but the following day. They were going to want him through waivers to open up a call-up spot for one of their young players. I believe it was Nils Hoglander. And just the way it fell, the schedule fell, they had to do that waiver a day early to free up that spot. Well, with same-day demotions, they didn't have to do that. Duckmans had won the auction for Dryden Hunt. He was all ready to make his Duckmans debut, and then obviously had to be back edited out and back to the Generals, just because of mirroring that or changing that to the same day demotions within the UFHL. So, but the way it works, Dean, is that obviously Dryden Hunt was claimed by Duckmans, relinquished back to the Generals as a result of the updated waivers rule. But Duckmans will still get first dibs or first right of refusal if the Generals deem Dryden Hunt expendable again or plan to demote him throughout this season. So he may still make an appearance, may still become part of Duckmans in the future, but certainly Dryden Hunt, currently a fourth liner with the Rangers, but a high scoring junior guy with some potential upside. And again, as we keep saying, Dean, every player matters on the UFFS platform when you're mirroring NHL roster sizes. So the reason the Generals wanted him back with the new waiver rule adjusting that they wouldn't have had to waive him under those circumstances is because, again, even if he's a fourth liner, every hit he gets, every shot he gets, it all counts. And the Generals are in the top 10. They're in 6th place right now. So they're gunning for a high finish, and they'll use Dryden Hunt while they can. And if they no longer have a spot for him, the door will be open potentially to a return to Duckmans.
Yeah, this is a guy, I think he had almost a 60-goal season in Moose Jaw, which certainly caught my eye, when he was playing in Moose Jaw, and you follow these guys along. And it would be pretty hypocritical of me to sit there and say, no, I'm keeping Dryden Hunt when it was the best decision for the league. And what do I always preach? Don't put your team before yourself. So it first of all, that's the first thing I thought was giving the player back because the rule made sense. I shouldn't have been able to bid on him in the first place. So this is the kind of thing that I try to preach all the time is, yeah, it might suck for your team. It's not going to help Duckmans. Dryden Hunt's not putting Duckmans into a playoff spot this year. But even if Dryden Hunt did, I would still have said, we got to go back the other way, because we have to make what's better for the whole league, which will make, a rising tide lifts all boats. So I just think that was the easiest, smartest decision. Thank you to Andrea and Nathan, who made it smooth, and the generals. All the transaction went. It was good. It was the right thing to do. And luckily, it was just practice for me, because I got to go play on the waiver wire for the rest of the week and actually got to keep those guys that I got.
Yeah, it worked out okay in the end for Duckmans, Dean, but certainly the league appreciates that Duckmans puts the league ahead of their franchise and makes that decision, because some people would throw their arms up and kick and scream and not want to let go of a Dryden Hunt, especially if they're a rival in the standings. But regardless of standings position, I think the right decision was made to offer the player back up and undo that waiver claim. So good job on Duckmans. And then again, continuing to work the waiver wire, claiming Jay Beagle and Anton Strahlman this week, Dean. And what caught my eye here is Duckmans is really taking on cap to potentially trade a higher cap hit, because you want to stay as far away from the floor. If you're looking at, you're obviously building for the future. You got a guy like Phil Kessel at $6.5 million cap hit. There's going to be interest in Phil Kessel at some point in the season, whether it's guy goes on LTIR, whatever the case. Some of these contenders are going to have a spot for Phil Kessel, and Phil Kessel very likely is going to get traded in the NHL, which is only going to further increase his value for Duckmans as an option to flip. But you need that $6.5 million in cap space in order to move out Phil Kessel. Well, now you got it, because you acquired $8.5 million combined cap space by claiming Beagle and Strahlman. And the other franchises involved, Red Army with Strahlman and certainly the Godfathers with Beagle, I think are happy to see those players go down the road and get an opportunity with Duckmans, because if not, they were going to have the buried threshold penalty on their protected list in the minors. So they didn't want to take on that extra cap hit to their active salary. And for Duckmans, you wanted that salary boost so that maybe you can flip a guy that's a little bit further along in his career for some, a good futures package for Phil Kessel would sure be another nice boost for Duckmans going into, like I said, that 22-23 season where you really want to take a step forward.
Well, and it also allows us to have, enough players on our roster. We've made some trades where our roster was depleted and some of our guys were demoted back down to the AHL. So we wanted to pick up some extra players, but you're exactly right. We did it last year with Nicholas Charmelson, grabbed him off the free agency because we were making deals. We've had people reach out about TJ Brody. If we drop that, there's $5 million going down. And you're right. If Phil Kessel at $8 million wants to get traded, well, we just brought in over $8 million to be able to do something. So, for teams like us, you see it in the NHL with Arizona and things like that. They want to make sure they have those players that they can get to the cap floor. And, this is hopefully the last time we're doing this. Hopefully, fast forward 365 days, we're talking about, me having to put a guy on waivers because we have another guy or something. And this is strategy. This is how teams at the bottom get to the top, in my opinion, in a smart way by spending $25 on a couple of players that gives us some cap. And who knows what they chip in, or maybe they become a trade chip down the road or something. You just don't know.
And the further you are from the floor, the more flexibility you have, which is great. And it's funny you mentioned the Arizona Coyotes, because all three players that we mentioned in that segment are Arizona Coyotes: Anton Strahlman, Jay Beagle, Phil Kessel. So the talk of the town for Duckmans is the Arizona Coyotes. But certainly, Dean, I think you just gave yourself that much more flexibility, which is the key. But like you said, also it brings in some roster players that are going to help Duckmans in the current season and maybe some leadership for the young guys that are coming up.
All right, so the Bentley Jacks, we've talked a lot about them, rightfully so. Top 10 team right now in the UFHL as an expansion team. I was trying to figure out what Brendan was doing this week, and then I clicked in. They're filling out their UFAHL roster, which they didn't have when they started. So tell me about what Brendan and the Bentley Jacks have been doing on the UFAHL side.
Yeah, they got some work to do on the UFAHL side, Dean, because they're in the same boat as Seattle. When the NHL expanded, they did an NHL expansion draft. You got to draft your NHL roster. Well, the AHL doesn't do an AHL expansion draft for Seattle's AHL affiliate, which is going to be announced likely next week. Dean, sounds like it's going to be the Coachella Valley Firebirds based in Palm Springs, California. So that's the branding that Seattle will be unveiling in the weeks to come. But certainly Seattle got an AHL franchise as part of the package when they became the 32nd NHL franchise through expansion. But they didn't get any players. It was, here's your franchise. You have an extra year. It doesn't start this year. It starts the following season, 1 year after the NHL team. But you have that calendar year to fill out the roster. The Bentley Jacks are in the exact same situation here. They have to start finding some AHL caliber players through their GM, Brennan Kopp, who's also a scout in the UFHL. He's out there scouring the start of the season in the AHL, some of the European leagues that have guys that could potentially sign in North America. He's doing the same thing Ron Francis and the Seattle squad is doing, trying to fill out who's going to be on the Firebirds next season in the AHL and who's going to be on the Bentley Jacks, yet to be named UFAHL affiliates. So certainly Brennan, being a Canucks fan, he didn't have to look far. He found a few guys in AHL Abbotsford, including the first ever goal scorer in the Abbotsford Canucks history, Jared Lukosevius. I might have butchered that last name, but he's a guy who had a hat trick in the NCAA championship game a few years ago. An older guy, maybe a late bloomer, but certainly a good AHL caliber player. And then the guy that I like, Alex Leipert, defenseman who was the captain of the Vancouver Giants last season. Local guy, stayed in Abbotsford, went unsigned by the Washington Capitals as a draft pick, and stayed close to home on an AHL only contract. So Brennan Kopp certainly doing his best to build out that UFAHL roster for the yet to be named franchise that they'll be branding down at that level of the league, which again, Dean, we're looking forward to hopefully having UFAHL gameplay up and running for next season when this Seattle and Bentley Jacks affiliate will be starting in the AHL and UFHL respectively.
Yeah, a lot of work that they have to do to fill out the rosters as an expansion team. And there was a lot of UFHL and UFAHL connections this week, actually, and something that you discussed last week, and teams seem to take notice as they're watching UFHL Now.
Yeah, it's great to see, Dean, that they're paying attention to what's happening on UFHL Now. And we did tease it within the UFAHL group and the UFHL group as well. But certainly there was a number of promotions, players that went from the UFAHL to the UFHL this week. The most interesting one, Dean, and this is one that worth addressing, is Jacob Peterson went from the Minotaurs to the Battlehawks. Well, the Minotaurs are West Coast Express's UFAHL affiliate, and the Minotaurs are independently owned. 9 of the 32 UFAHL franchises aren't owned by their UFHL parent club. So as an independent owner, Jordan Shedletsky was able to shop Jacob Peterson, find an offer that he liked, and then take it to West Coast Express and say, hey, here's the offer I got from the Battlehawks. Do you guys want to match this? Do you want Jacob Peterson on your protected list? And West Coast Express passed up that opportunity at the price that Battlehawks were offering. So Jacob Peterson moved to the Battlehawks. And that's how that works with the affiliations. You do have first right of refusal if your UFAHL franchise is independently owned. And then the rest of these, Dean, were all promotions within the UFAHL to the UFHL, but all the same owner owns both franchises. Chris Weidman, obviously, to Strong Island. They need some depth on defense, some depth on the NHL level roster, and Weidman certainly has a role in Montreal. He's been on the power play there as well. Kyle Burrows from the Tenacious Owls to the Brutes, gets in the Brutes lineup. He actually got in a fight last night, got one of those new fighting category points. Jake Lecision and Jonas Ronberg are two guys that were made their NHL debuts with Vegas this season, going from the Noblemen to the Royals for Lecision, and the Mighty Mallards to Duckmans for Jonas Ronberg. And then the Caymans to the Gators, Dean. They had previously promoted Vladimir Kachev in LA, and now they've promoted William Lockwood, who's stuck on Vancouver's roster at the start of the season. And Mikhail Maltsev, who again is playing in the lineup in Colorado, goes from the Enforcers to the Godfathers. So we are seeing quite a few promotions, and there may be more to come. I know the Spitfires and Grizzlies have been discussing whether or not to promote Brandon Duhaime, who's actually been a late bloomer for Minnesota, and looks like he's going to get an opportunity. And then certainly scouts, Dean. There's a lot of scouts that have the rights to NHL players that have made the NHL cut this season. Karel Vejmelka, who just got lit up a little bit by the Oilers last night, a 5-1 loss for Arizona, but he's been promoted from the Wise Guys prospects to the Godfathers. Mike Hardman, another good story, former West Kelowna Warrior, actually, had a good college career and made it into Chicago's lineup. He's been promoted from Wild West Scouting to the Outlaws. And then another sale, Dean, Daltech Scouting Services sold Jasper Weatherby to the Monarchs. So George Batchel and the Monarchs get a live body from the San Jose Sharks, Jasper Weatherby, to somewhat offset the loss of a guy like Nikita Kucherov. Obviously not going to fill those shoes. And keep an eye, Dean, on the Ice Vikings affiliated scout Dave Drinkwalter. Last season, he had a lot of prospects that graduated to the Ice Vikings, and there's certainly some interest in his players again this season. Guys like Taylor Radish and Wade Allison, who are likely going to be in the NHL at some point this season. Radish already is. Allison's coming back from injury. So look for Dave Drinkwalter to eventually make a decision whether the Ice Vikings bring those players up through their affiliated scout or whether they take the highest bidder, as we've seen from Daltech Scouting Service with Jasper Weatherby. And as we also mentioned with Jacob Peterson, certainly going to the Battlehawks instead of West Coast Express.
Well, it's certainly exciting times ahead for scouts right now. I mean, we have the season underway. Junior buildings are full of people again. We can go watch games. I'm really excited. The weekend of the Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball franchise auctions, I'll be in Regina for the live shows, and the Brandon Wheat Kings are there. So my dad, my brother are going to drive out from Brandon, and we'll go to a game. And I just can't wait. The Wheat Kings are actually here in town tonight, so we're actually going to try and check that one out. But that's great news for scouts because they can start compiling their list. And we also have UFWJ, the World Juniors, the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors to look at. So great time to be a scout right now.
It is, Dean. And you mentioned the submitting the preliminary rankings, the top 64 for the 2022 NHL draft. The scouts are working on their lists right now. And certainly there's a lot of lists coming out this month. NHL Central Scouting put out their initial watch list this past week. And most of the independent scouting services, online scouting services, have released their preseason preliminary rankings already, their first edition. And the UFFS scouts will be releasing theirs next week and going into early November. Probably by the time the UFLB franchise auction is upon us, the scout rankings will be published. But they have another week to really evaluate what's happening in the junior leagues. And the reason we delayed ours, Dean, because some people said, why didn't we put these out, in September or October and be one of the first ones out instead of one of the last ones out? Simply just the sample size. A lot of these OHL kids didn't even play last season. Let's see them get up to speed. Let's let them play 10 games before we decide where they rank in our preliminary rankings. So, but the deadline is November 1st for the UFFS scouts to get in their top 64 for the 2022 NHL draft, which, as you know, Dean, helps set the projected minimum bids for the entry auction algorithm, which is certainly of interest to UFHL franchises going into the 2022 entry auction as well.
Yeah, and then more opportunity for scouts to have the players that they have listed involved in the Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors. I know Craig Button recorded a video for us. Him and I are going to be starting up tracking the draft in November. We're going to be doing a World Junior preview draft show, and where we're going to talk about some of the best players. Maybe we'll just do a first round, or maybe it'll be a top 20. I'm not sure, but I'm really excited about this concept, and scouts should be as well.
Especially only 10 franchises, Dean, and scouts, like I said, getting the revenue from the leasing of their prospects that'll be playing in the UFWJ tournament as well as the World Juniors in the real world. So I think there's going to be a lot of hype for the World Juniors in the coming weeks. Any day now, we should get the World Junior Championship schedule. Who's going to be the New Year's Eve game? Who's going to be the final game of the round robin for Canada and all the big matchups in Edmonton and Red Deer? So I think that's going to be exciting when the schedule comes out. And then certainly, Dean, it's been quieter than usual on the World Juniors front through October, because normally right now we're ramping up coverage for the CHL Russia series, where a Russian all-star team comes over and plays a 6-game showcase against essentially all-star squads from the WHL, QMJHL, and OHL. That's not taking place this year for obvious reasons due to COVID and travel. So we don't have that little bit of a promo coming up, but certainly I think that the World Juniors, there's going to be a lot of roster projections, selection camp roster announcements. So there's going to be a lot of UFWJ news coming in the first weeks of November, even without that showcase of the CHL Russia series. So can't wait to see what's to come with UFWJ, and that'll be here before we know it, Dean. November 20th and 21st. We're exactly a month away from UFWJ franchise auctions.
Well, it's okay because, I'd love to watch that series because I do enjoy it. But this just takes us back to the 80s where that Russian team would come over and we didn't know a whole lot of these guys because they weren't already playing in the CHL. So I know some of the guys that, are Russian players and European players are more common, obviously. But this kind of gives us that, that cloak of, I wonder who's going to be on that Russian team. And although sometimes those Russian teams come over with some misdirection, and some of those teams have been terrible and they're not anywhere close to the World Juniors. So I guess you just never know. But it just adds a little bit more intrigue and takes us back to the old days.
There is some mystique there, Dean, absolutely, with the European clubs coming over this year and not knowing who's going to make those rosters. And like I said, though, I mean, we're in the internet age. It's not quite like the 80s where you literally was a mystery who's going to show up and how old are they even going to be and all the rest. We had all sorts of controversies back then. But for the vast majority of the kids that are going to be at the World Juniors, they're already going to be registered by scouts. Scouts have the rights to these players. But I know last year, Dean, there was 4 or 5 on almost every roster for the World Juniors that weren't registered. So it's going to, when these selection camp rosters come out, it's going to be a frenzy for the scouts to grab who's left, who made the cut, or who's going to be auditioning for their country at the World Juniors and get those guys. Because as we mentioned last week, Dean, and in previous episodes, that fourth liner for Austria, if he scores a goal, he's going to have value. Somebody's getting credited for that goal in the UFWJ. So I think all these prospects that end up making World Junior rosters are going to be a hot commodity for scouts in the weeks to come.
Yeah, it used to be less about who is coming over and more about who is staying when the team left and those defections from the 80s. We remember the Nedveds and the great stories like that. So it's going to be awesome, and Ultimate Fantasy World Juniors is going to make it even more next level. Larry, thanks as always. Have yourself a great weekend and enjoy the hockey.
Same to you, Dean. It's going to be another fun weekend in the UFHL as well as the NHL.
This is UFHL Now with Dean Millard. Get in the game, where you own the game.
All right, another fantastic segment with Larry Fisher, the encyclopedia. And man, does this guy put a lot of time into UFFS. It's pretty incredible the amount of work that he does for all of us to make sure things run so smoothly, including joining me every Friday. Before we go, we have to get in the duck call. This week, it's kudos. I'm giving kudos out to Andrea, Nathan, and Larry, the 3 people that make this league run so smoothly, for doing the right thing when it came to the waiver situation, roster configuration. We try to talk about no in-season changes because the NHL doesn't. But if there's just something that doesn't make sense, it should be changed. And I know we're going to try to do that with UFLB. We're going to try not to have mid-season changes. But when you make a sort of a rule or you tweak things and you don't see something that might happen, you got to react. And the 3 forwards on the roster was just something that nobody saw coming. The waiver situation was reacted to, and in a good way that made sense, and boom, we go about our business. So kudos to Andrea, Nathan, and Larry for making the right decision, and for always making the right decisions, in my opinion. I think that they do just a terrific job when it comes to making sure this league is run in the proper way. So thank you very much to them, and thank you very much to Larry for joining me, and thank you very much to you for tuning in. Time for us to say goodbye on this program for another week. Want to remind you, though, some very important things happening in the UFFS world. UFWJ auctions, November 20th and 21st. Email A. Karandek at UFFsports.com to register. Andrea will get you in the mix. UFLB auctions, November 5th to 7th. Email info UFLB at UFFsports.com to register or get more information. And, of course, American Football Legends League auctions ending tonight. 7 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Eastern. Info at UFFsports.com to register and get your hands on what is going to be legendary. Andy McNamara will get you all the details on that. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. And thank you to Larry for joining me on the program as well.
UFHL Now is produced
Take care.
by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.